He played the guitar every day, pouring his soul into every note. But on one fateful afternoon, everything changed when the young girl stopped to listen. He had no idea who she was or what she would set in motion. Imagine this scene: a young man, homeless and hungry, sitting with his old guitar in a quiet corner of the bustling city. Music was his only friend, the strings his only escape from a world that had forgotten he existed. His name was Gabriel, a talented musician caught in the struggles of life on the streets. On a summer afternoon, beneath the blazing sun of Los Angeles, a figure appeared. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, stopped and sat down to listen. Gabriel, lost in his music, didn't notice. His fingers moved across the strings as though they carried the weight of his entire life. But what he didn't know was that this moment, this simple encounter, would lead to a series of extraordinary events that he could never have imagined, a transformation that would disrupt everything he thought he knew about fate, chance, and destiny. This isn't just a story about a homeless man playing his guitar to survive. It's a story about how a chance encounter can change everything. If you're curious to see where this meeting takes Gabriel, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on emotional and unexpected stories like this. Are you ready to see what happens next? Los Angeles, the city of dreams, where the glow of Hollywood shines brightly, attracting millions to chase success and fame. But behind the glamour, there's a hidden corner few know about, where darkness and poverty still prevail. This city, with its streets aglow with neon lights and busy crowds, is also home to thousands of lost, desperate, and forgotten souls trying to survive in silence. Every morning, as the scorching sun casts its rays over the crowded streets, Los Angeles becomes a city of contrasts. Cars rush by, people hurry along, but while the luxury vehicles glide past with cold, indifferent stares, the old buses are packed to the brim, struggling to navigate through narrow streets. The city is full of glamour, but behind it lies the story of those whom society has turned its back on, those who never appear on the screen or in the bright, glossy images of advertising campaigns. In one forgotten corner, unnoticed by most, stands an abandoned building, quietly bearing witness to the city's secrets. Under the harsh sun, Gabriel, a young man with big dreams of music, lives in a rundown room in that building alongside other homeless individuals. The old building, with cracked walls and a decaying roof, no longer holds any sign of past prosperity. Every morning when Gabriel wakes up, he hears the wind whistling through the cracks and the hurried footsteps of people passing by on the streets. His room is just a small corner, a temporary refuge with makeshift planks of wood serving as his bed. No soft mattress, no warm blanket. Gabriel wakes up in the darkness of his shabby room, his stomach growling with hunger. He raises his hand to wipe his face, his tired eyes gazing out the window where the harsh rays of the Los Angeles summer sun shine through. The intense light feels like flames burning his soul and symbolizing the harshness life has dealt him. Once a young man full of ambition and burning dreams of music, now all he has left is an old guitar, its strings worn and rusted over time, and melodies that only linger in his memories. Gabriel once had a family in Mexico, where he spent happy years with his loved ones. But life is never easy, and financial struggles, along with family conflicts, caused his life and his family's to spiral into despair. The collapse of his family left Gabriel with no choice but to leave his homeland in search of a new opportunity in a foreign land. He brought with him a guitar, the close companion of his growing years, as a symbol of his big dreams, hoping that music would lead him to a brighter future. However, upon arriving in Los Angeles, reality was far from what he had imagined. Instead of grand performances on a big stage with stage lights shining upon him, Gabriel faced the harshest challenges. He had arrived in a city famous for its glamour, where people believed that every dream could come true. Yet Gabriel found himself homeless, no family, only the old guitar that he clung to as if it were the only link between him and the world. Gabriel continued to play his guitar on the bustling streets, in corners that few noticed. His music blended with the noise of the city, but no one stopped to listen. No one dropped a coin to help. Despite this, Gabriel never gave up his faith in music, for it was the only thing he had left. Each time the guitar played, he felt like a part of him came alive, as if music were the breath of his life. Although life was not easy, he never lost his small hope for a better tomorrow. Day by day, Gabriel continued to sit beneath the large tree in the park, his old guitar in hand. His thin fingers moved skillfully across the strings. Simple yet vibrant melodies resonated, filling the vast space, blending with the sounds of the bustling city, the honking cars, the hurried footsteps, the laughter of those passing by. None of it distracted Gabriel. He focused only on his guitar, on each note that came from his heart, as the sole way he could feel that he still existed in this world. His stomach often ached with hunger, and many times he felt exhausted, as the spare change in his guitar case barely bought him a meager meal. But Gabriel never stopped playing, not because he hoped for a full meal or a bit of charity, but because music was the only thing left in him, the only thing that helped him feel that he wasn't being left behind. The old guitar was worn, the strings rusted, but to Gabriel, it was not just a tool for survival. It was his companion during his loneliest moments. Every time the guitar sounded, he felt as though a part of his soul was released into the air, blending with the vast world beyond the cracked wall of the abandoned building. To him, the guitar was the only way to break through the loneliness of life, the only place where he could find solace in these dark days. Gabriel didn't need applause, didn't need anyone to stop and look at him, didn't need any recognition. To him, each melody, each note had meaning. The dreams of grand stages, fame, and a life free from daily struggles seemed to fade into the background. Yet, in that adversity, he still held on to his belief in music like a fire that never went out in his heart. The audience would feel Gabriel's relentless persistence. Though he was just a young man, his tired eyes still gleamed with determination. They would see the resilient self within him, never giving up on his dreams despite the immense challenges and obstacles. Gabriel remained steadfast in his belief in the future. The viewers would feel the pain in the music, but they would also sense a flicker of hope in each melody. Gabriel didn't just play to survive. He played to feel alive, to remind himself that he still had a dream, no matter how distant it seemed. The guitar and Gabriel's music became the only way he could find purpose in life. And no matter how everything around him seemed to crumble, with people rushing by without ever stopping to listen, Gabriel still didn't give up. It was the mental strength that the audience could empathize with, the persistence that never gave up even when everything seemed to be against you. No one knew that in those moments of solitude, in those hours when he felt abandoned, music had helped Gabriel to be reborn, and that was his only hope. Perhaps one day someone would notice him, or at least his music would reach the heart of someone in this city. That morning, like every day, Gabriel sat beneath the large tree in the park, his old guitar in hand. His thin fingers began to strum familiar melodies. But today, something felt different. Each note he played no longer gave him the sense of satisfaction it once had. Instead, they felt like hollow echoes, like cries for help no one could hear. The park remained busy with people rushing by, but no one stopped to listen to him play. No one turned their head when the sound of his guitar filled the early morning air. People just stared at their phones, hurrying along with not a single glance or moment of attention. Gabriel no longer saw the amazed looks or encouraging smiles he had once hoped for. Everyone just kept walking by as if he didn't exist. A coldness spread through him, as if he were simply a part of the silent space, nothing more. The old guitar in Gabriel's hands began to feel heavier than ever before. Every string that vibrated seemed to remind him of a dream that had faded, a dream no longer within reach. He wondered whether he had been wasting his life on hopeless melodies. Day after day, month after month, he continued to play, but his life never changed. The money wasn't enough to buy food. It wasn't enough to exchange for a place to stay, even temporarily. Every day felt the same, and he felt like a pawn in a game with no player. Can I keep living like this? Gabriel asked himself. The question echoed in his mind, and he couldn't find the answer. It felt as if he had walked into a dead end, unable to find an escape. Fatigue, despair, and loneliness rose up within him like a wave, washing away all the remaining hope. He couldn't help but think, am I still worth something? Is music still a part of me? Or is it just a distant past I'm desperately clinging to avoid facing reality? Gabriel looked at the guitar case in front of him with only a few spare coins inside. coins that weren't enough to make him feel he could continue living. The invisible feeling of failure, of being lost, overwhelmed him. All the people passing by, all the cold stares, not a single one of them acknowledged him. It seemed he had become a ghost in the very city he once dreamed of. And in that moment, Gabriel felt so small, so meaningless, like just another part of this vast world that no one cared about. Gabriel lowered his gaze, staring into the guitar case in front of him. The few scattered coins inside, the product of hours of playing on the busy streets, were all he had to show for his efforts. Each time his eyes fell on those coins, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of bitterness. They were the coins people gave him out of obligation, almost as if they were throwing them at him reluctantly, treating him like an annoyance on the sidewalk, an unwelcome figure disrupting the perfect picture of Los Angeles. The feeling of helplessness grew more overwhelming with each passing day. Gabriel couldn't stop questioning his own existence. Does this life even have meaning anymore? Am I truly living, or am I just existing? Each day felt like a repeat of the one before. He woke up in his rundown room, played guitar under the harsh rays of the Los Angeles sun, and was met with the same indifferent faces walking by. He kept playing, but no one ever stopped to listen. The city's luxurious cars rushed by, their drivers oblivious, while the hurried footsteps of busy pedestrians never paused to acknowledge him. Every time Gabriel looked down at the few coins in his guitar case, a flood of memories washed over him. He thought back to the time when he was a young man brimming with hope. This very guitar had once symbolized his dreams and aspirations, a way to connect to the world beyond his small town in Mexico. It was the instrument that had carried him from his home, filled with the hope of finding success in Los Angeles, a city where he believed that anyone with talent could make their mark. But now, the guitar had become nothing more than a means to survive. The worn-out strings, the rusted tuning pegs, it had become a reminder of how far he had fallen. It was no longer the instrument that carried his dreams, but a tool that simply allowed him to scrape by. He strummed the same old, tired melodies, repeating them day after day, as if trapped in an endless cycle. Gabriel's eyes lingered on the few coins in the case, his heart sinking deeper into the abyss of despair. How many days had it been since he had a decent meal, one that could fill his stomach and not just momentarily silence the hunger? How many sleepless nights had he spent lying awake, weak from hunger and exhaustion, wondering if this was all there was to his life? He had fought so hard, held on to his belief in music as his savior, but now it felt as if that belief was slipping away, fading into the background like the music that had once ignited his soul. The melodies he played no longer carried the same emotional depth. They felt hollow, the music lifeless and detached from the passion he once poured into each note. What was once a beautiful expression of his heart now felt like a mechanical repetition of sounds, a routine he was trapped in with no one to hear or understand it. His fingers moved across the strings, but it was as if the music was no longer a reflection of his inner world. It was just noise, lost in the chaos of a city that had forgotten him. As Gabriel continued to strum, the feeling of hopelessness pressed down on him, a weight too heavy to shake off. The world around him seemed to continue moving, but he felt like he was stuck in place, invisible to everyone. The city of dreams that had once promised so much to a young man with a guitar was now nothing more than a harsh, indifferent reality. No applause, no recognition. He was just another face in the crowd, just another dreamer who had been forgotten, a nobody lost in the vast, cold expanse of Los Angeles. His belief in music, his only refuge, was now crumbling, and he found himself questioning everything. Was he still worth anything? Was he still the same person who had once dared to dream of a better life through music? Or had he become someone else, someone who had lost his way and forgotten what it meant to hope? He could no longer find the answers. All he had was the old guitar and the handful of coins in front of him, symbols of a life that felt pointless, a life of never-ending struggle and quiet defeat. Gabriel couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of failure, of being completely lost. It was as if the city itself had swallowed him whole, leaving nothing behind but a shadow of the man he had once hoped to be. In that moment, Gabriel felt smaller than ever before, completely insignificant in the vast, bustling world around him. Gabriel was playing his guitar beneath the large tree, his fingers gently gliding over the strings, but his mind was swirling in a storm of emotions. The melodies he created no longer carried the smoothness they once had. Instead, they were just silent, empty sounds reflecting the emptiness he felt at that moment. Despite his best efforts, his trembling fingers still played hopeful notes, yet all he received in return was indifference from those around him. A middle-aged man walked by and noticed Gabriel playing. The man stopped, frowned, and shook his head as if he had just encountered something bothersome. No smile, no look of sympathy, just disdain. The man turned away and walked off hurriedly, as if he couldn't afford to spare another second of his time on Gabriel's presence. Only the sound of the man's footsteps echoed like a cold bell, cutting through Gabriel's musical space. This moment felt like a slap in the face to Gabriel. Each time someone shook their head, each time someone turned away, he felt like a ghost, as though he didn't belong in this world. The feeling of being invisible, of being nothing more than a shadow in society, had tormented him for so long, but today it felt like a deeper wound, one that couldn't heal. Gabriel couldn't help but ask himself, what do I have left? Who am I in their eyes? The audience would feel the rising anger in Gabriel's heart, the injustice and contempt he had to endure simply because he was homeless, simply because all he had was an old guitar and broken melodies. How could someone like Gabriel, with dreams and talent, be forgotten, ignored in a society full of people who only chase after money and status? This moment marked the beginning of a rage building inside Gabriel, not only in his heart, but also in the hearts of the viewers. The indifference of society, the coldness of those who wouldn't even spare a glance for someone like Gabriel, was truly unacceptable. The loneliness that Gabriel felt in this moment served as a wake-up call for all of us, a reminder that perhaps we are too caught up in our own lives to realize that there are still people who need to be seen, who need to be heard, and who deserve to be respected. Gabriel sat under the large tree, his old guitar rested in his hands. His tired eyes followed his thin fingers as they moved across the worn-out strings, strumming familiar, melancholic melodies. Each note that rang out felt different today, lacking the vibrant energy it once carried. What was once joyful now felt like a slow, heavy sigh from a soul that had been drained of hope. He could almost feel himself sinking deeper into the void, each day blending into the next, a cycle that never changed. His existence seemed reduced to the monotonous strumming of strings, his music a faint echo that the world couldn't hear, and he was beginning to question whether he had any place in this city at all. The world continued to move around him, bustling with energy, yet no one seemed to notice his struggle. People walked past without sparing a glance, caught in their own worlds, consumed by the busy pace of their lives. Gabriel could feel their indifference like a cold weight pressing on his chest. He kept playing, lost in the music, trying to capture the fragments of hope that remained within him, but it felt futile. His music, once a source of connection, was now just a faint whisper against the cacophony of a city that didn't care. Each note he played felt hollow, each melody a reminder of how invisible he had become. But then, in the midst of the crowd, something unexpected happened. A little girl, no older than 10, suddenly appeared. She was dressed simply, with her hair tied neatly in pigtails. Her steps were light as she moved through the crowd. Gabriel, absorbed in his music, hadn't noticed her approach. She stopped in front of him, catching him off guard. He looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance. She didn't say anything, but instead stood there silently watching him. Her large eyes glimmered in the morning light, not with curiosity or hesitation, but with an intensity that Gabriel couldn't quite explain. It was as though, without a word, she had connected to something within him. After a few moments, the girl slowly sat down beside him on the grass. She continued to watch, her eyes fixed on the movement of his fingers across the guitar strings. There was no hesitation in her gaze, no uncertainty, just quiet, unwavering attention. Gabriel was struck by the intensity of her focus, as if she understood exactly what he was trying to convey. The world around them seemed to fade away, the noise of the city dimming into the background. In that moment, it was just the two of them, bound by the music he played and the connection that began to grow between them. She didn't speak, but her presence was enough to fill the space with something powerful. Gabriel felt something shift inside him. It was as if her quiet, steady gaze had brought with it a warmth, a light that pierced the darkness surrounding him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Gabriel didn't feel invisible. The girl was not just another face passing by, ignoring him and his music. She was truly listening, truly present in the moment. Her silence wasn't one of indifference. It was one of understanding, of a connection that didn't need words. It was as though she could feel the emotions he was pouring into the guitar, and in return, she gave him something more valuable than any coin, a sense of being seen, of being heard, of being understood. Gabriel continued to play, but this time the music felt different. Each note he played was not just an empty sound, but a message, a conversation between him and the girl sitting beside him. The melody seemed to carry more weight, more meaning, as if the simple act of playing had become something sacred. It was as though, for the first time in a long while, the music had a purpose again, something to give. He no longer felt like he was playing into a void. The little girl, with her quiet attentiveness, had become his audience, his connection to a world that felt distant and unkind. As Gabriel played, he could sense the change in the air, the warmth of the sun, the quiet of the park, the gentle rustling of the leaves. Everything seemed to align in that moment. In her silent presence, Gabriel felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, fragile but undeniable. Perhaps he wasn't completely invisible. Perhaps his music still had the power to touch someone, to make a difference, no matter how small. The girl, with her simple act of listening, had restored a part of his soul that had been lost for so long. Gabriel didn't know why she had stopped to listen or what had drawn her to him, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in what felt like forever, he had been seen. And in that quiet, unspoken connection, he found a sense of peace, a reminder that no matter how much darkness surrounded him, there was still light to be found, even in the smallest of moments. Gabriel could feel something change in the air around him as the little girl sat beside him, quietly listening to every note he played. It was a gentle sensation, like a new breeze weaving its way into his mind, dispelling the fatigue and sadness that had weighed heavily on him for so long. Over the past months, he had grown so accustomed to the indifference and coldness of the world around him. But the simple presence of the little girl, her quiet attention, seemed to awaken him from a deep slumber. With a strange feeling in his heart, Gabriel no longer played the same sorrowful tunes. Instead, he began to play deeper, more soothing melodies, as though the music had returned to him, reigniting something within. His fingers glided over the strings with a different sense of purpose, as if the guitar had come to life again, able to express all the emotions he had kept hidden inside. The little girl said nothing, but the way she sat, her eyes lighting up with every note, was a silent form of encouragement, a deep and powerful support. Gabriel began to feel his belief in himself gradually being restored. Music was no longer a futile struggle, but a part of his journey to reclaim hope. He no longer felt abandoned or useless. Looking at the little girl sitting beside him, quietly listening, Gabriel understood that sometimes not everything needed to be said. Sometimes a glance, a simple act of care, was enough to make someone feel valued, to make them feel that they were truly being heard and understood. The audience could sense the powerful shift in the atmosphere. The feeling of despair began to transform into hope, from cold indifference to warm connection. The little girl's simple act of caring had lit a small fire in Gabriel's heart, helping him realize that there was still a reason to continue. Music was no longer just a means to survive. It had become a way for him to reconnect with himself and the world around him. Thanks to the girl, Gabriel could now see a brighter future, one where music not only gave him life, but also the recognition and hope for a more meaningful existence. With every note, Gabriel felt the change in his heart. He was no longer playing to survive, but to share his emotions, to connect with kindred souls just like the little girl beside him. This was the hope he had been searching for all along. In her silence, the girl had helped Gabriel rediscover his belief in life, in music, and most importantly, in himself. The feeling of hope flooded the air, allowing the audience to experience the profound transformation taking place. They could feel the dramatic shift from despair to faith, from darkness to light. The little girl, though silent, had become Gabriel's greatest source of encouragement, and this moment would serve as a turning point in his life, opening the door to a new chapter for him. Day after day, Gabriel continued to play his guitar under the large tree in the park, as if it had become an ingrained part of his life. But something strange happened. The little girl, the one who had brought him hope, no longer appeared. At first, Gabriel thought maybe she was just busy with her studies, but as days turned into weeks and she remained absent, a growing sense of confusion and worry began to rise in his chest. Did she really exist, or was she just a dream, a figment of his mind appearing at the moment he needed faith the most? Each time he looked up, hoping to see her standing there quietly listening, the park was filled only with hurrying strangers, their faces unfamiliar. Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling of loss. Even though she was just a child, her presence had brought him a spark of light in the darkness. Now that light seemed to have vanished, and Gabriel found himself facing loneliness again, with the question he couldn't answer. Could his music really change anything? One day, as Gabriel played, his tired eyes focused on the worn strings of his guitar, his fingers moving across them with a familiar rhythm. A man passed by, walking briskly, not even sparing him a glance. Gabriel didn't mind. He continued playing, hoping that at least the sound of his guitar could bring some peace to the chaotic atmosphere around him. But then the man stopped in front of him. He seemed irritated by the music and, standing there with disdain, shook his head before speaking in a cold, dismissive tone. "What are you playing here for? You're just disturbing others. It's useless." Before Gabriel could respond, the man turned and walked away, leaving him with a pang of sorrow. Gabriel watched the man's retreating figure, the man's coldness hitting him like a bucket of ice water to the mind. Once again, he felt like he was nothing more than an invisible part of society, unworthy of attention, unworthy of even a second of someone's time. The audience would feel the anger rising within Gabriel as once again he was mocked, belittled simply because of his circumstances. He wasn't just seen as a homeless person. Now, even his music, something he loved, something he had devoted his life to, was being dismissed as an annoyance, something worthless. People like Gabriel, with talent and passion, still weren't given the recognition or respect they deserved. The feeling of being judged, overlooked, would ignite a sense of anger in the viewers. The indifference of society, the contempt from people like the man who had just passed by, would make them question, does fairness really exist in a society where talent and individuals are judged solely on their status or wealth? This sense of injustice would make the audience reflect on the biases that exist in society, highlighting the need for fairness and compassion toward everyone, regardless of where they come from or what they have. The anger within Gabriel boiled to the surface as he realized that in this society, there seemed to be no place for people like him. Day after day, he had been ignored, dismissed, and even belittled, and now it seemed that no matter how hard he tried, no matter how much passion he poured into his music, the world continued to turn its back on him. One afternoon, as he sat by the side of the road strumming his guitar beneath the scorching sun, lost in the familiar rhythms of the old melodies, a well-dressed man suddenly appeared. Gabriel noticed him walking past, but then, to his surprise, the man stopped in front of him, a strange expression on his face. Gabriel felt his heart skip a beat. There was something about this moment, something that told him this wasn't just another passerby. "What are you doing playing here?" the man asked coldly, his voice dripping with disdain. "You really think anyone's going to care about you playing that sorry excuse for a guitar? Do you expect to make some money off of that junk?" Gabriel's heart sank, but he didn't speak right away. He stared up at the man, his mind racing with thoughts, but he couldn't find the words. The man's judgmental tone struck him like a slap across the face. How dare this stranger come up and belittle him without knowing anything about his life, his struggles, or his dreams? But the man wasn't finished. He stood there for a moment, shaking his head as if Gabriel's very presence was an inconvenience to him. "You must think that everyone who walks by will throw some change in your guitar case, huh? Is that what this is about? Playing for a few bucks, trying to get sympathy?" The man said, his voice getting sharper. "Why don't you get a real job instead of sitting here wasting everyone's time?" With every word, Gabriel's heart tightened, and a wave of anger rose up inside him. He could feel the frustration building in his chest, but he still said nothing. He watched the man shake his head one last time, dismissing him with an air of superiority. And then, without another word, The man turned around and walked away, leaving Gabriel sitting there, seething in silence. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Gabriel's eyes followed the man as he disappeared into the crowd, his footsteps growing fainter and fainter. But the sting of the man's words remained, cutting through Gabriel like a blade. The fury that had been simmering inside him finally exploded. How dare he? How dare this man, who knew nothing about him, nothing about his life or the pain he carried, stand there and pass such judgment? Gabriel felt his hands tremble on the guitar strings as the rage surged through him, threatening to consume him whole. Every insult, every cruel word seemed to deepen the wound. Gabriel had heard the same contempt from countless others, but this time it felt different. This time it felt like the weight of the world had crushed him in an instant. Why did society look down on people like him? Why was he judged by his circumstances and not by his worth, his talent, or the dreams he carried in his heart? It wasn't just his music that was being dismissed. It was him, his humanity, his right to be heard, to be seen. With every strum of his guitar, Gabriel's anger intensified. He thought about how he had been nothing but a shadow in this city, ignored, trampled on, dismissed by those who had the privilege of never knowing what it was like to be invisible. The man who had spoken to him didn't know what it felt like to wake up every morning with nothing, to struggle to get through the day, to put his heart into something and have it thrown back in his face. That man hadn't lived his life, hadn't felt the weight of failure pressing down on him every single day. The anger didn't just burn in Gabriel's chest, it consumed him, making him question everything he had ever believed in. How could this be fair, he thought? Why was he treated as nothing more than a nuisance? Why was his music, something he loved, something he gave his life to, treated like garbage? The audience would feel Gabriel's fury rising like a storm within him. They would sense the injustice, the bitterness that flowed through his every note, every strum. Gabriel wasn't just angry at the man. He was angry at the entire system, at the society that had failed him and others like him. How could a world that celebrated fame and wealth so readily dismiss those who had talent but not the right background? How could people who lived with privilege so casually look down on those who were struggling to survive? The viewers would feel the intensity of Gabriel's emotions, the raw power of his frustration. They would sense the aching sense of abandonment that had been building within him for so long. They would feel the depth of his despair, his desperation for someone, anyone, to see him, to hear him. The little girl, his only source of hope, had disappeared, and in her place was this painful, stinging reminder of just how little value he had in the eyes of the world. Gabriel's music would take on a new tone, a reflection of the anger, the hurt, and the rage that now filled him. His strums became more forceful, more insistent, as if the guitar was his only outlet for the torrent of emotions inside him. He poured every ounce of his frustration into the music, as if hoping that somehow the strings would carry his pain to the world and force it to listen. This moment would mark a turning point, not just for Gabriel, but for the audience as well. The rage he felt wasn't just his. It was a reflection of the larger systemic issues that plagued society. The viewers would be forced to confront their own biases, their own treatment of those less fortunate, and perhaps even their own roles in perpetuating this cycle of indifference. Gabriel's anger became a symbol of resistance, a defiance against a world that had cast him aside. And in that defiance, there was power, there was hope, and there was the promise that one day things could change. Gabriel could no longer bear the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a life that seemed unchangeable. He knew deep down that if things didn't shift soon, he would be stuck in the same cycle forever, a life where music, once his salvation, had become the only thing he could hold on to, but it seemed incapable of altering his fate. The world around him moved on while he remained in the same place, desperately hoping for a break, for someone to see him, to recognize his worth. He had tried so hard, yet nothing ever seemed to change. Desperation finally led him to make a bold decision. He would enter the major music competition that he had heard so much about. This was the opportunity that could potentially turn everything around for him. This was his shot, the one moment he had been waiting for, a chance to finally be seen, to prove that he wasn't just a homeless man strumming a worn-out guitar on the streets, but a real artist with talent and a story to tell. Gabriel knew that if he could just make it through this competition, it would open doors for him. for the future he had dreamed of, a future filled with recognition, success, and a life he could truly call his own. As the day of the competition arrived, Gabriel's heart raced like never before. His hands shook slightly as he held his familiar guitar, his only trusted companion through so many years of solitude. It wasn't fear that made his fingers tremble. It was anticipation, an overwhelming sense of urgency. He knew this was the only chance he might ever get. When he stepped onto that stage, all of his hopes, all of his dreams were placed on that moment. Every strum, every note would be a reflection of everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed. His eyes sparkled as the sound of his guitar filled the air, the music flowing from deep within him. This was it. This was the moment when he would prove himself to the world. He played his heart out, each note carefully chosen, each chord carrying the weight of all the years he had spent struggling in silence, of all the emotions he had kept locked away. He played for himself, for his dreams, and for the girl who had once given him a glimmer of hope in the park. But when his performance ended, there was no wave of recognition, no applause, no warmth from the judges. Instead, there was only an uncomfortable silence, a quiet void that stretched between him and the judges. They looked at him coldly, their faces unreadable, their expressions indifferent. Not a single one of them gave him even a hint of approval. They simply looked at him, unmoved. Gabriel stood there on the vast stage, his guitar hanging from his shoulder, feeling smaller and smaller with every passing second. The spotlight that had once felt warm on his skin now felt like an interrogation, exposing him for everything he wasn't. He was nothing but a speck in their world, a ghost, invisible even to those who were meant to be looking at him. The hope that had filled him before was now drained, replaced by a deep, gnawing sense of failure. The competition he had invested all his hopes in seemed like nothing more than an empty promise. No one had seen him, no one had heard the sincerity in his music. They had all just let him slip by, unnoticed, discarded like so many others. When the results were announced, Gabriel wasn't chosen. The crushing wave of disappointment slammed into him like a tsunami. All the dreams, the hopes, and the expectations he had pinned on this one moment now lay shattered in front of him. He had put everything he had into this, only to be met with indifference. The life he had hoped for, the recognition he had yearned for, seemed like a distant fantasy, a dream that would never be realized. He had given everything, but it wasn't enough. The harsh reality of his fate weighed heavily on him. The pain of failure surged through his veins, and for the first time in years, he felt as if he had nothing left to give. As Gabriel left the competition hall, he couldn't help but feel like he was once again returning to the same life he had before, the life he was so desperate to escape. The world outside felt cold, indifferent, and he was just one more forgotten soul. He returned to the park, the place where it all began, and sat down by the side of the road. He picked up his guitar, and for a moment, it felt like everything had come full circle. The familiar weight of the instrument in his hands was comforting, yet at the same time, it felt like a reminder of everything he had yet to achieve. He strummed the first chord, but the music felt hollow. Each note was a repetition of the ones before. His efforts, his dreams seemed to slip through his fingers like water. The music that had once been his lifeline now felt like a futile attempt to hold on to something that was slipping away. That day, like any other, Gabriel sat on the sidewalk in the park, his weary eyes staring at the few scattered coins in the guitar case in front of him. He no longer held much hope for the future. All he had left was music and his old guitar, but even those seemed incapable of changing his life. Gabriel had grown accustomed to being ignored, and no matter how hard he played, he still received no recognition. It felt as though all his dreams, all the hopes he once held, had vanished into thin air. But then, one unexpected afternoon, while Gabriel sat under the tree, lost in thought, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen in surprise. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello." Gabriel answered, his voice full of doubt. "Hello, Gabriel. This is Maria, a music producer. Do you remember the little girl you met in the park?" A soft but confident voice came through the other end of the line. Gabriel froze, his heart racing. "The little girl?" he asked, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Yes, that little girl is my daughter. After hearing you play, she told me all about you and your music, and I've decided to help you," Maria said, pausing for a moment before continuing. We were very impressed by your talent, and I believe you deserve a chance to shine." Gabriel couldn't believe his ears. He listened as the words sank into his mind. "The girl, she's your daughter?" Gabriel repeated, feeling as though a wave had just swept over him. "Yes, that's right," Maria laughed softly. "She inspired me, and I want to give you a real opportunity. I have a music project coming up, and I want you to be a part of it. You'll have a chance to showcase your talent to the world." Gabriel felt as if his heart had stopped beating. Everything suddenly became clear, and the puzzle pieces of his life began to fall into place. The little girl he had met in the park, the one who had said nothing but had given him hope, she was the daughter of someone in the music industry. He hadn't realized who she was, but she had seen him, and now the opportunity Gabriel had long dreamed of had finally arrived. After years of longing, struggling, and holding on to hope, the day Gabriel had always dreamed of finally arrived. With the support of Maria, the music producer, he was given a chance to perform on a grand stage, a moment that could change everything. This wasn't just any performance. It was his one shot at showing the world who he really was, at proving to everyone who had doubted him that he was worthy. His entire life had led him to this point, and his old guitar, which had been his only companion for so long, was no longer just a tool for survival. It had become the vessel through which Gabriel could share his deepest emotions and unspoken dreams. The night of the performance, Gabriel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Standing backstage, his heart pounded, every beat filled with anticipation. The air was thick with tension, and the lights on the stage shone dimly, casting a soft glow over the space. The silence of the audience echoed in his ears as he prepared to step onto the stage. Every clap of applause he had heard earlier, every hopeful glance had led him to this exact moment. In that moment, he wasn't invisible. He was Gabriel, the musician, the artist, a man with a story to tell and a talent that deserved to be seen. As he walked to the center of the stage, his guitar in hand, Gabriel's nerves almost melted away. His fingers shook, not from fear, but from the weight of everything he had been through. The pain, the rejection, the struggle, and the hope that had kept him going despite it all. As the first chord rang out from his guitar, it was as though the world around him faded away. Each note was no longer just sound. It was a declaration of his existence, a testament to everything he had lived through. Gabriel played with a passion and a fervor that came from deep within his soul. The music was no longer just an escape for him. It had become a way for him to communicate with the world, a way to connect with others who had once been like him, forgotten, invisible, unheard. As his fingers moved over the strings, the music poured from him like a stream of raw emotion, every note reflecting the joys, the pains, the dreams he had carried for so long. His eyes sparkled as the sounds reverberated through the hall, each one filled with an energy he had never known before. Under the stage lights, Gabriel no longer felt alone. For the first time, he felt seen, he felt heard. The audience's eyes were no longer filled with indifference. He could feel their attention, their respect, and he knew that they weren't just listening to the music, they were listening to him. They were hearing his story, his truth, his soul. In that moment, he wasn't just playing for survival anymore. He was playing for recognition, for validation, for a life that was worth living. His guitar, once the symbol of his isolation, had become the bridge between him and the world, connecting him to those who had once overlooked him. As the final note of his performance hung in the air, a brief silence fell over the hall. Gabriel stood still, his heart racing, his breath held, unsure of what was to come. And then, as if on cue, a powerful wave of applause erupted from the audience. The sound washed over him like a flood, and for the first time in his life, he felt what it was like to be truly appreciated. A tear slipped down his cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of finally being seen for who he was. His smile was not just one of pride, but one of liberation. He had done it. He had proved that he wasn't invisible. He had made the world listen. As the applause continued, Maria walked onto the stage, her eyes filled with pride. "Congratulations, Gabriel," she said, her voice warm and filled with admiration. "You've done something that no one thought was possible. I'm so glad I could help you reach this point." Gabriel's mind was spinning, still trying to process everything that had just happened. And then, to his astonishment, Maria handed him something. a recording contract. It was the opportunity he had only dared to dream of. He stared at the paper in his hands, unable to believe it was real. This was everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, now in his grasp. Every sleepless night, every lonely day, every tear he had shed, all of it had led him to this moment. "Take it," Maria said, her smile wide. "This is your chance. You've earned it." For a moment, Gabriel was speechless. He could hardly comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. This was not just a contract. It was his future, his life transformed in an instant. His music, his passion had led him here. He was no longer just the homeless musician playing on the streets. He was Gabriel, an artist with a place in the world, someone whose dreams could finally come true. As he looked at the contract, he realized that he had not only gained recognition, but had also earned the chance to shape his future. Music, the very thing that had kept him alive and going for so long, had finally become his ticket to a new life, a life filled with opportunity, respect, and the chance to share his gift with the world. No longer would he be the forgotten man, the invisible musician. He was someone now. He was real, and the world was finally ready to hear him. Gabriel's smile as he looked at the contract wasn't just one of pride. It was a victory for every person who had ever felt overlooked, ignored, or forgotten. And in that moment, Gabriel knew that his life was just beginning. This was not the end. This was only the beginning of the journey that had always been meant for him. Gabriel stepped into his new life with all the hope and dreams that had ripened after years of struggle and sacrifice. The success he found in the music competition, followed by the recording contract, offered him a chance that he had longed for his entire life. It wasn't just about getting recognized. It was about stepping into a world he had once believed was out of reach. For the first time, the possibility of a new life, a life filled with music and purpose, seemed tangible. It was the moment that had been so far off in his mind, something that had seemed impossible during the long, lonely nights he spent on the streets with his guitar. But even as the doors to his new life opened, Gabriel knew that this was just the beginning. There were still hurdles to overcome, and he wasn't naive enough to think the road ahead would be smooth. In the early days at the recording studio, Gabriel could sense the stark contrast between this world and the one he had come from. The buzz of activity, the professional equipment, the teams of people who worked behind the scenes, it was all so overwhelming. Gabriel had been playing music on the streets, where everything was about freedom and passion. But here, in this professional setting, things were calculated, timed, and meticulous. There were deadlines, expectations, and a level of precision that he had never had to deal with before. The pressure to produce music that would resonate with an audience, one that was not just passing by in a rush but truly listening, was immense. Gabriel found himself in a world that demanded more than just raw talent. He had to adapt. He had to learn the intricacies of studio work, the technical side of music that he had never experienced before. He had to find a way to balance his natural instincts with the expectations of the industry. In the beginning, he struggled. The first recordings weren't perfect, far from it. There were moments of frustration when he felt the music wasn't flowing the way he wanted, when the sound didn't carry the same emotion that he used to express on the street corners. But Gabriel wasn't one to back down easily. He spent long hours in the studio rehearsing, refining, and learning. Every time he felt disheartened, he remembered the feeling of playing on those lonely streets, the joy that music brought him, and the hope that one day his music would be heard. Slowly but surely, the music began to transform. Gabriel's sound grew richer, deeper, and more refined. His earlier frustration began to dissipate as he embraced the challenges and learned from every mistake. There were times when Gabriel questioned whether this was all worth it. The pressure of the industry, the expectations, and the demands felt suffocating at times. But through it all, he held on to one unshakable truth: his love for music. It was his anchor, the one thing that had kept him going all these years. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now the world was giving him a chance to show that he was more than just the sum of his circumstances. He wasn't just a homeless man with a guitar anymore. He was Gabriel, an artist with something to say. The path was not easy, and Gabriel faced moments of self-doubt and frustration. The realities of the music industry were harsher than he had ever imagined. He had to work with producers, managers, and fellow artists who sometimes didn't share his vision. and he had to make compromises. But through it all, Gabriel remained focused. He worked harder, honed his craft, and pushed through the challenges. He learned to deal with rejection, to keep going even when things didn't go according to plan. Over time, Gabriel began to notice the shift, not only in his music but also in how he was perceived. No longer just a street performer, he was now being recognized as a serious artist. His tracks began to gain traction, his name started circulating within the industry, and he was invited to collaborate with other musicians. The life he had once dreamed of, one filled with recognition and success, was slowly coming into fruition. The audience, both in the studio and beyond, could see Gabriel's transformation from a man who once felt invisible to a man who was now commanding attention. Gabriel's journey was a testament to the power of perseverance. He had learned that success wasn't just about talent. It was about resilience, adaptability, and most importantly, the refusal to give up. His story wasn't one of instant fame or success. It was a story of gradual growth, of overcoming obstacles, of pushing through the inevitable setbacks that life throws at you. Gabriel's evolution from a struggling street musician to a rising star in the industry was not just about the success of his music. It was about his personal transformation. He had learned to trust himself, to believe in his worth, and to stand up for what he deserved. The trials he had faced had shaped him into a stronger, more self-assured individual. He was no longer the man he once was. The man who had been beaten down by life, who had doubted his place in the world, was gone. In his place stood Gabriel, the musician, the artist, the man who had conquered his fears and proven to the world that he had something valuable to offer. The story of Gabriel comes to an end with a powerful message about belief, patience, and resilience. He endured months of hardship, from the indifference of society and loneliness in the bustling heart of the city to the tireless efforts to hold on to his dream of music. Even in his darkest moments, Gabriel never gave up on his belief in music and in himself. His failures and painful moments did not break him. Instead, they made him stronger. Although the world around us may sometimes forget us, sometimes all it takes is a little faith, a little patience to change our lives. Gabriel, once a shadow wandering the streets of Los Angeles, found his light through a young girl and the unexpected support of a mother in the music industry. It was Gabriel's resilience, his patience in pursuing his dreams despite the countless challenges, that led him to an opportunity he once thought was beyond his reach. Gabriel's story is a reminder that even in adversity, we can find the light. We may not know where our path will lead, but if we don't give up, if we keep persevering and trusting in ourselves, there will always be an opportunity waiting for us. Gabriel, once a homeless man, now shines on the grand stage, proving that talent and passion can transcend any adversity. And though life remains full of challenges, he has learned an important lesson. Sometimes it's only in the toughest moments that we truly discover the strength hidden within ourselves. Gabriel's life is not a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but it is a testament to perseverance and faith in the good. Despite the storms we must face, dreams are never too distant as long as we do not give up and always believe that the light will find its way to us, no matter how small it may seem. His story teaches us that the greatest triumphs often come after the hardest struggles, and no matter how lost or alone we may feel, if we continue to believe in our worth and fight for our dreams, we will always find our way. And so, Gabriel's story comes to an end, a journey filled with emotion, belief, patience, and resilience. We hope that this story has touched your heart and reminded you that no matter how hard life may seem, as long as we don't give up, opportunities will come and our lives will change. If you found this story meaningful and want to continue exploring more deeply emotional and insightful stories with Emotional Journey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Please share your thoughts in the comments and help us spread these meaningful messages to more people. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next stories.